This is the best monster I've ever seen! This is the best monster that I've ever seen! This is the best monster I've ever seen! This is the best monster I've ever seen!
Cotton, that one was a rock.
This is the best rock I've ever seen! Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Iceborne is here and Iceborne is glorious! Every single monster in this expansion has caused me some level of enjoyment. I can't remember a single hunt that I have negative feelings about now that we've all had a little bit of time to digest all of the new content and think a bit more critically about the monsters we've been given. It's time to ask the age-old question: which Iceborne monsters deserve the most praise? So without further ado, here are my top 5 monsters in Iceborne.
Number 5, Savage Deviljho.
Coming in at number 5 is the only pure returning monster on this list, though I will say that Yangaruka does come impressively close. His reincarnation in the New World is absolutely stunning, but the same can easily be said about my actual choice in Savage Deviljho. Capcom really found the perfect changes to make to the cast of returning monsters from old games, and Savage Joe is no exception. From his aggressive acrobatic attacks to his multiple new uses of the dragon element, this fight got a total overhaul, and that is before we even consider just how much Savage Deviljho's pre-existing mechanics actually affect the New World more than the Old World as well. The biggest example of this being his permanent enraged state. In Worlds Connected maps, Savage Joe will follow you to any zone that you go to that isn't a camp, but only because he's scared of the handler. On top of this, he not only targets other monsters, but actively does chunks of hundreds of damage at a time to a monster just constantly. In fact, if you can dodge his attacks, it is almost undeniable that Savage Deviljho is actually a benefit to have on a hunt with you, almost like having a 5th hunting partner that does more work than the original 4 combined. It's the way the classic Savage Deviljho personality gets made even more real and even more accurate that truly makes me love the Iceborne incarnation of Savage Deviljho, which is exactly why he makes it to number 5 on this list.
Number 4, Veil Val.
Man, there's so many mushrooms in here.
The Lord of Fungus, and who is in fact a fun guy himself, Veil Val is just a pile of excellent design decisions stuck together in a beautiful collage of smoky death. Normal Valhazak was one of the most interesting creatures in Monster Hunter World, but his fight fell pretty hard from the fact that, full effluvial resistance made him super easy. Veil Val, however, takes it to another level, not only being still a challenging fight with the anti-Val skill, but without the skill it is an absolute nightmare in the best possible way. Survival-wise, you'll be wishing that you had a machine that could just constantly feed you nullberries, but in terms of the decisions behind the design, it is just breathtaking, because everything about this new Valhazak variant pushes towards the horrid, terrifying image they want to portray with this skin-covered visage. His little mine-like puffs of effluvium when you walk up too close to him are an awesome little effect. His new ability to beam from multiple directions instead of just the same arc every time adds a surprising amount of depth to the fight, and his big giant spore release attack is one of the simultaneously coolest, scariest, and creepiest things that I've ever seen come out of a mushroom, and I've seen a lot of mushrooms in my day, and that honestly is the big thing that caps it off in my mind. Every single design decision here is essentially based around what would happen if Valhazak, with Valhazak's biology, was mixed with mushrooms and fungi, and they allowed it to completely change his symbiosis, the way he fights, and it's just fantastic from the visual design all the way down to his actual combat and personality, which is why Veil Valhazak has made it to this point on my list.
Number 3, Seething Basil.
This monster is honestly quite hard to truly categorize. I love regular Basilgeese to bits. He is a monster chock full of character and plenty of interesting mechanics, and Seething Basilgeese is essentially just that, but much better in every single category. Right from the beginning, the first time you see him in front of you with his lightly glowing face and an underglow on his tail, it's easy to realize that there is something just fundamentally wrong about this creature. Something totally unnatural and unusual, and the best way to explain it is he sort of is just like a radiated Basilgeuse, I guess. He is slightly mutated, and more importantly, when he gets super angry and starts glowing his purpley pinky color, his scales literally actively mutate and grow once detached from his body, not only sticking to any surface they collide with, but literally expanding until they create a fairly large explosion. The Seething Geese, as I like to call him for short, has a number of brand new attacks and combos that really spice up the fight on top of the enhanced scales. His super move is ridiculously cool, and it's just hard to not have an intense appreciation for the visuals of this fight. I mean, it is a spectacle and a half, especially considering that this monster isn't even an Elder Dragon. The only thing holding him back, and I mean the only thing, is the fact that we don't really know why he is the way that he is. I feel like if he had a proper explanation for what was going on for him, something that genuinely made sense of his changes, I would just like him even more. But as it is with his glowing glory, Seething Basilgeuse still cinches his spot at number 3 on my list.
Number 2, Marielle.
Ow! What the?
These last two were really ridiculously hard to choose between, but in the end, number 2 ended up being Marielle, who it is really hard to actually summarize my feelings about without babbling on for an hour in the middle of my list. I mean, there is just absolutely nothing like this monster up to this point in this series. There are some things that have slight overlaps with singular mechanics, but Marielle brings us gameplay unlike any other, in a design package unlike any other, with an unusual fight pace and spectacular visuals. The multiple ways that she uses water beams are really enticing. The waves on the floor are spectacular, the little tremors, and the fact that she uses the puddles on the floor to create literal electrical mines, and that is before even considering her massive zone-ending super move, or her little meticulously crafted animations that give her an endless amount of character and personality. And at the end of the day, objectively speaking, I do think Marielle is the best monster in Iceborne, and easily in contention for the best monster of all time. However, it is my personal bias as a player and as a person that puts this beauty of an Elder Dragon at number 2 on this list.
Number 1, Coral Pukei-pukei.
If you know me, if you really know me, then you already knew the real answer to this question. The only choice I could really choose for the top spot. Regular pukei-pukei is already one of the quirkiest, interesting, cutest, and unusualest creatures we've seen in a long time. But when Iceborne came around, Coral took that and made regular pukei-pukei look like it blended in perfectly with the crowd. From the very first look at Coral, you get to see something absolutely breathtaking. His new color scheme, like an underwater phoenix, removes any question of whether or not a Pukei could fit into the Coral Highlands. No matter what happens from this point onwards, he honestly already matches the map perfectly. But then you fight him. Oh, goddamn, do you fight him? Coral Pukei's tail water beams are one of the most enjoyable sets of attacks I have ever seen. They come at silly angles that you have to properly learn to avoid, and sometimes it even looks like he struggles to control them himself, whether it's literally actively drinking out of a mushroom to spray out of his tail like a turret, or creating a slow but unstoppable swirling torrent of water from the air, of which your only real safety is to, roll inside the arc of. This fight is constantly innovating on conventional attack patterns. All of the things we are taught to expect from monsters based on their types of attacks get thrown out of the window, and it is all exemplified beautifully by his frontal beam. The beam that splits into two by the use of him reaching his tongue under and into it, slowly transforming it into one of the most unique attacks in the series just as a whole. The fight is extremely fun, extremely unique, it is innovative, and all of it, every single move, every ability, every animation, all leads you to the Coral Pukei-pukei's distinct personality. No other monster has the biological makeup or pure strength of tongue to do his beam. No other monster would properly show off the way his tail moves in such an unconventional way, and the fact that he is just so derpy and cute, and somehow his moves even reflect that as well. It just Coral pukei-pukei is my favorite monster in Iceborne, but beyond that, he is my favorite subspecies of all time by a large margin, and on top of that, both Marielle and Coral pukei-pukei are definitely in my overall top 5 monsters of all time. However, I do still need a little time to digest them before I decide confidently on their place within that. But all in all, this leads me to a revelation. My 2 favorite monsters in Iceborne are water monsters, an element so rarely explored in the Monster Hunter series, to the point that the only water monster in base world was Giratotus, and that was really only by a technicality. When the team behind our new monsters is allowed to truly explore new ideas and work with elements that haven't been done 1,000 times over, we get really interesting things. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of cool fire monsters, for example, but when you do a fire monster, you are limited by what the other fire monsters already do to a certain extent. Water monsters have given the developers a sort of freedom, and in return for that freedom, the developers gave us 2 pure works of art labeled as monsters. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been my list of the top 5 monsters in Iceborne. Do you agree with my list? What monsters would you have put here instead? Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or report important news about the kingdom and Amelia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.